In the world of sports, a year is all it takes to change the way players and teams are viewed by the public, and basketball is no exception to that rule. Within a year, a franchise can go from being considered as a championship contender to a failed project. And the same goes for star players. No one knows that better than the Los Angeles Clippers, who were considered as the winners of the 2019 offseason, as well as one of the favorites to win it all during last season. However, things didn't go as expected, and the team collapsed in the second round of the playoffs against a younger and less experienced Denver Nuggets team. But despite everyone in the locker room and coaching being in part responsible for their epic loss, there was someone who received the most criticism among everyone on the team, Paul George. Still, the franchise believes not all the blame can be thrown at him and even decided to extend his contract. So now the question is, will PG be able to play like an MVP candidate once again? Welcome to Courtside. Today we're taking a look at George's disappointing first season in LA and why the team believes he's about to have a bounce-back year. Since their foundation, the Clippers' relationship with success hasn't been a strong one. In 50 years, the team's made only 15 postseason appearances and won just 5 playoff series while never making it to the conference finals. In other words, the franchise has not had too many reasons to celebrate throughout its history. However, things started to change by the start of the 2010s. By putting together a core that consisted of Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan, Los Angeles enjoyed a solid run in which it earned consideration as a championship contender. But unfortunately, the team's postseason struggles continued and Lob City was eventually disbanded. But it didn't take long for the organization to build another contender. This time around, the front office managed to acquire 2-time Finals MVP Kawhi Leonard and MVP candidate Paul George in a series of moves that suddenly turned them into one of the most talented teams in the league. With PG and Kawhi on board, the Clippers added 2 of the best two-way stars in the NBA to a roster that already included Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, and Montrezl Harrell. So with a deep roster, 2 superstars, and an elite coach in Doc Rivers, most people believe this would be the year where LA would finally reach the conference finals and perhaps even win its first championship. But as we all know, that wasn't the case. The team performed well during the regular season, but its best players were unable to build a chemistry as a unit. Thus, when it mattered the most, the Clippers collapsed, and neither George nor Leonard were able to stop what became a humiliating defeat at the hand of the Nuggets. However, while almost all the team's best players failed to perform, as was expected from them during the last 3 games of that series, and Rivers didn't make the necessary adjustments on time, George was the one to receive most of the attention from the media. That had a lot to do with his poor performance during the first-round series against the Dallas Mavericks. During a 3-game stretch, the wing played awfully, and his shooting percentages were historically low. And though the Clippers were able to defeat the Mavs in 6 games, people blame PG for not being able to play at a high level. Following the criticism, he decided to open up, explaining that his struggles were caused in large part because of mental health issues he'd been dealing with inside of the Orlando bubble. And that seemed to help him improve his game, given that he had a better series against Denver before shooting 4 from 16 from the field in the deciding Game 7. Still, even though Leonard and the rest of the team also had a disappointing performance in Game 7, and Rivers and the front office eventually agreed to part ways, the media and most of the public decided PG should be the one receiving all the blame. The criticism continued during the offseason as both people and analysts talked about how the Clippers could benefit from trading the star wing to a different team. Multiple reports also described how some of his teammates felt unhappy with the treatment he received from the organization despite his poor play. However, as time went by, it became clear the team would stick with him and Kawhi for at least another season, and then shortly after he expressed his desire to retire as a Clipper, the franchise announced it had extended his contract for 4 more years. The move, which guarantees George will receive max player money until at least 2024, was received with skepticism from the media for the same reason they criticized him earlier in the year. They don't think he'll be able to help the team win a championship. However, while there are some reasons to question his fit with the Clippers, there are also reasons why any team would want to sign PG to a max contract, and Los Angeles clearly understands that. So now that he won't have to worry about money for a long time, let's take a look at how things could improve for him from now on. One of the main reasons why George faced so much criticism after playing inconsistently during the playoffs had to do with the expectations that were placed on him. After all, just a season before joining the Clippers, he had a career year and finished 3rd in MVP voting, so there's a chance people were expecting to see something similar to him in LA. However, that proved to be a difficult task for him, and some of that was because of things he couldn't control. The most evident among them was the fact he dealt with multiple injuries during the season and didn't have a chance to establish a rhythm with his new team. That may sound like an excuse to some, but chemistry was the reason why LA couldn't make it out of the second round, and George was one of the players that didn't have enough time to find his place within the roster. Before the start of the season, he was unable to attend training camp and play any preseason games as he was recovering from shoulder surgery. During that time, he missed the opportunity to get familiar with a new system and with new teammates. His absence extended over to the first 11 games of the season, but then, even after having gone through full recovery, his shoulder started bothering him again, limiting his effectiveness. Along with these health issues, there was the fact that most of his teammates also dealt with different problems that made them miss time during the regular season. As a consequence, the Clippers rarely had all of their best players available at the same time, and that inconsistency ultimately resulted in their elimination. However, even when healthy, there were times when George didn't look like he was playing at his best, and his production also showed that. Most of his averages suffered a regression compared to his last season in Oklahoma City, and while some of that should have been expected given the abundance of offensive options the Clippers had, some people thought it was proof of him being overrated. But the truth is that was in part a result of the way he was being used. In a recent interview, he described how Rivers tried to use him as a kind of spot-up shooter. And while we can tell he didn't have the same role as a player like J.J. Redick or Ray Allen, there's also reason to believe he wasn't used to the best of his ability. The most evident reason why he struggled to find his rhythm is simple. He and Kawhi play the same position and are used to taking the same kinds of shots. In other words, both players got in each other's way from time to time. But since Rivers was aware of that, he decided to put the ball in Leonard's hands, thus giving George the role of a secondary scorer. That move may have seemed like the best thing to do at first. After all, Kawhi was coming off a season in which he guided a team to its first championship by having the ball in his hands and closing out games with his scoring. On the other hand, George was coming off a spectacular season from a production standpoint, but his team had been eliminated in the first round of the playoffs for the fourth straight season. So it was reasonable to make him a Robin to Leonard's Batman. Unfortunately, the Clippers roster was built in a different way than that of the Raptors, so trying to make things work by giving the ball to Kawhi and getting out of his way wasn't necessarily the best option. The most evident difference between both teams was that LA didn't have a player like Kyle Lowry or Fred VanVleet who could distribute the ball and create plays for his teammates. Therefore, Leonard was tasked with making plays for his teammates, and though he averaged a career high in assists per game, having him as the primary playmaker harmed the team's rhythm. But while lacking a natural point guard hurt the whole team, there was an additional reason why George struggled so much during his first season with the Clippers, and that was the fact that he was now a second option. During his early years in Indiana, PG rose to stardom after being given the keys to the Pacers' offense. As the first option on offense, he became a versatile scorer that was able to take his team deep into the playoffs. Things didn't work out in the same way in the years after his injury, nor during his first season in OKC. But the reason why he became an MVP candidate in his second year with the Thunder was that he became the focal point of the offense once again. During his first season there, he had to adjust to playing with Russell Westbrook and Carmelo Anthony, but by his second year, Melo had been traded away, and Westbrook decided to take a step back so he could become the team's closer. As a result, he enjoyed the best season of his career and played like one of the best players in the league. So is there a way he can regain the form he displayed with the Thunder? Since the Clippers couldn't acquire a playmaker during the offseason, some of their issues may remain the same. However, Coach Ty Lue could try to put the ball in George's hands more often. That way, he could create plays for himself and get into a rhythm more easily. That would mean Kawhi would need to sacrifice a few touches. However, unlike PG, the Claw has succeeded in situations where he's not been the primary ball handler before. In both Toronto and San Antonio, Leonard excelled by receiving the ball and creating a shot for himself. And since George is a good enough passer, there's the possibility he could make plays for Kawhi while also having a larger role within the offense. In any case, Lue will need to figure out a way in which both of his star players can perform to the best of their abilities. And while that may be a difficult task, the last time he had to do something like that resulted in a championship run for the Cavaliers. In the end, while a lot of the criticism that George has been receiving over the last few months is valid, some of it is not. His performance during last season's playoffs was mostly a disappointment, but he wasn't the only reason why the Clippers suffered a collapse in the second round. If the team wants to avoid a repeat of the same situation this time around, it'll need to address the things that led to its collapse. Promoting Lue seems like a step in the right direction, but the success of the team may ultimately depend on whether he's able to use PG's talent properly or not. And if he isn't, the franchise may go through another disappointing year. But now, do you think George will be able to bounce back and lead the Clippers to a deep postseason run? Or do you believe it's only a matter of time before the front office starts considering trading him away? Let us know in the comments. We hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to like it and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. We are Courtside.